Hi, and welcome to Animalia the Podcast. I'm Natasha, and I am so excited. You wouldn't believe how long this little dream of mine has taken to come to reality. But we are here, and I'm ever so thankful that you're here listening, and I promise to keep this going for as long as you'll have me. So, what is this all about? Well, as the name suggests, Animalia is a podcast for the people who love animals. There's so many great people in Trinidad and Tobago who are doing the thankless work of ensuring that animals, dogs, cats, horses, hamsters, livestock, and wildlife are cared for and protected. So I wanted to use my skill and experience with over 20 years in radio to bring their stories to you and to share the joys and rewards that come from a life with animals. Another motivation for this podcast is my own experience. I have one cat now, her name is Coco Chanel, but almost 3 months ago, another cat I had, Toro, was tragically killed by dogs that strayed from their home. I'll get back to that topic later on in the podcast, but for now, I'll tell you about Toro and how he came to live with us. So about 9 years ago, I rescued him from the stadium, the National Stadium. I was attending an event there at the VIP lounge, and he was this tiny little thing sitting in the planters outside the VIP lounge and looking all sweet and talking to me. So when I went out onto the covered stands, he followed me. He posed and I took a picture. That was it. And I will share that picture on the Animalia Facebook and IG pages so you'll see how hard he was to resist. So it was from that moment that I knew I had to take him home with me. The connection was instant between us, and although I already had another cat, his name was Missy. He's a tomcat, so I'll explain that story another time. I was a little worried at first that Missy wouldn't accept him, but it turned out to be the best love story I have ever witnessed. Missy became Toro's playmate, his surrogate parent, his liming partner, and his partner in crime. I can't explain how or why their relationship blossomed like that, but I can only surmise that Toro needed a loving home, and that's what he got with us. So I tell that story to say that it is that kind of love that I want to bring to this podcast. Those are the kinds of stories that I want to share. But we will also talk about the hard things, about the cruelty and neglect and evil sometimes that we witness, about what authorities should be doing about it, and how we should be educating the public about animal welfare. I will be sharing my own frustrations, not just about Toro's death and the aftermath, but about animal welfare in general about Trinidad and Tobago. And it is my fervent hope that Animalia becomes the glue, or the pod in whale terms, that brings all animal lovers together. So enough from me for this episode. Let's have a chat now with a woman who was really and truly a great comfort to me in the immediate aftermath of Toro's death. We had never met in person, but you could say she's the reason why I started a petition, which is something else I'll be talking about, Justice for Toro at change.org. She's the reason why I harassed the local police every day, the reason why I made a report. She's the reason I read all the legislation there is to read about animal welfare. And in some respects, she's one of the reasons I started this podcast. You may be more familiar with her organization, Venus Doggess of Love, and I am honored to have as my first guest on Animalia, Elspeth Duncan. Hi Elspeth, welcome to Animalia. I'm so happy you agreed to speak with me and do your duty as the first guinea pig guest on Animalia.
Thank you.
Let's start with your organization, Venus Doggess of Love. For those of us who are not familiar, could you fill us in on the inspiration behind the organization and the work that you do?
Okay, Venus Doggess of Love really started when I adopted my dog Venus as a pup from the Tobago Animal Shelter. Just after adopting her, a lot of animals kept being drawn to us, animals that needed rescuing, whether it's a chicken, another dog, cats, all kinds of animals started coming to our doorstep. And in rescuing them and featuring them on Facebook, and also featuring Venus on Facebook, and people were joking and saying, oh, Venus should have her own Facebook page. I mean, they weren't joking, but for me as a joke, I set up a page for Venus called Venus Doggess of Love, a play on the word Venus Doggess of Love. And the page started gaining popularity. You know, people would comment on the rescued animals. People started adopting rescued animals locally and abroad. It just grew, and it went from strength to strength. People started donating money to help the animals who were being featured. And in August 2019, I incorporated Venus Doggess of Love as an NGO.
And so far, your main work at the organization is basically rescuing animals in need of care.
Yeah, rescuing animals in need of veterinary care. They may be injured, they may be mainly dealing with injury, dogs and cats that need spaying and neutering. Also, a lot of animals suffer from neglect. So, if there is an animal that's being neglected and it happens to be owned, I can't really intervene and take the animal away. Although I have managed to do that in some cases with the owner's permission, because sometimes owners say, look, I don't want it anymore, you can take it. But sometimes it involves just advising owners. You know, when they have a dog tied up on a short chain, they may never have heard of a run line, they may not be giving the dog water or food. So it's just things that we would consider basic. Not everybody offers those aspects to their pets. So a lot of advice as well. Especially in the community, I go riding around my bike on mornings and just look around in the community, see if there are any animals in need of help.
And rescuing is something that requires a huge amount of emotional reserve. So how do you distance yourself from getting attached to these animals?
The aspect of suffering animals, yes, it can be very distressing, especially when you see it and hear about it almost every day. So, at some point, I did have to develop an inner mechanism whereby I could turn off that switch, that emotional switch. Otherwise, it's very easy as an animal rescuer to get overwhelmed and just very drained, low energy, a kind of a helplessness, realizing, you know, this is so overwhelming. Could we ever really deal with it and truly help the amount of animals that need us? So in order to continue doing it, you have to find that place in yourself where you can just turn off the switch and do what you have to do in a very practical way. It doesn't mean you don't feel empty for the animals, because that's very necessary. But it's to separate the two. Feel what they feel, to understand what they're going through, and then be able to just act in a very practical way. And the detachment, yes, I practice that regularly by, you know, when I foster an animal, you become very close to it. And a lot of people find it hard to let them go. But when I let go of an animal that I've fostered, I'm letting it go to a fantastic home, as good as or better than the home I could have given it. So the separation isn't that difficult.
You know, there are instances where people may see an animal in need, but not have the means to take care of them immediately. Do you have the facilities to do that? And I mean, you have done that. You're fostering animals yourself in your own home, but for those who are not so fortunate.
Well, yeah, fostering could be a problem, especially in Tobago. It's very difficult to find homes that will foster. I no longer foster because I have enough pets of my own. But recently we built something called Canine Cottage, which can house one, maximum two street dogs that we rescue. But that's only for Venus rescues. For others who rescue, I would suggest put it on Facebook, send out emails, send out pictures, and keep at it until you can find somebody who can help you to foster. Otherwise, the only alternative is a shelter, in which case you'll have to relinquish the animal. And I don't particularly like relinquishing an animal because it means you lose control over the outcome, you know, where it goes. You put it in the hands of the organization that takes it on.
Tell us about one of the many animals you would have rescued over the years, and what about that particular case was memorable to you?
I quite like the story of Bonnie. She's a stray dog, but I called her Bonnie because she was in Bon Accord. And she was quite a mangy-looking dog, with very long nipples. So she probably had quite a few litters. And she used to be walking up and down Milford Road with her puppy. And the two seemed very close, but obviously homeless. And one day when I was at Penny Savers, I saw a man grab up the puppy, put it in a box, run to a taxi, put the puppy in the trunk of the taxi and drive off. And all the while, this poor mother dog was just looking at the man in complete shock and like, where are you taking my puppy? And the look of grief on his face really touched me, and I thought, I need to help this dog. So that day, I saw her walking up and down the road, sniffing and looking, really distressed, looking for the puppy. And I brought her home and, got her checked out at the vet. She had tick fever. She had a number of issues that had to be dealt with. And I fostered her for a while. And in that time, I featured her on the Venus Doggess of Love page. And what I mean by featuring is that I don't just put up one picture of a dog and say, hey, this dog is up for adoption, but I feature daily pictures, daily videos, so people get used to the dog, get into the personality. It's kind of like having a daily soap opera. Mm-hmm. And people get attached to the animals that are featured like this. And whereas locally, people were saying things like, oh, she's so ugly, because she had an underbite and these bulging eyes. A woman in the States really thought she was cute and said, look, send Bonnie up and I'll find a good home for her. So everything was arranged. Bonnie flew up to Massachusetts, and the woman, Sandra, who has since become a very good friend through adopting, she and her friends have adopted several of our Tobago rescues. And when she saw Bonnie, she just fell in love with Bonnie, and to this day, Bonnie lives with her. She is a beautiful dog. They all go to puppy school. Some of them go through agility training. Bonnie did agility training. She's won several awards. She's also a kind of not quite a service dog, but she brings a lot of happiness to children in school. She visits a doggy daycare center where she takes care of puppies, so that even though she lost her own puppy and she grieved, it's now like she has a whole new life, lots of puppies cared for and lots of children, and it's a blessing that some of these animals experience when they're adopted abroad and when they're adopted locally to good homes. But the point I want to add is that I find foreigners are more eager to adopt a pothound. They'll be like, oh, how cute, even if it's covered in mange, they can still see the beauty of that dog, and they'll adopt it once it's better.
What do you think is the reason for that, our aversion to Caribbean Terriers, pothounds, who are the most loyal, usually very healthy animals?
Yeah, I think it's because they're so common, B, because they're seen as street dogs, so therefore they're just seen as nothing special. They also don't have a price tag on them. I think people, as a status symbol, they like to say, oh, I have a husky or I have a whatever, which shows, I'm not saying everybody who has a husky thinks like this, but I think there are people who think it's like having a car. If you have a BMW as opposed to some kind of simple old-time Datsun, those old Datsun. People would look at the person in the BMW and think, oh, they're rich or they're whatever. So I think it's like that with dogs. In terms of the pothounds, foreigners, they see animals in a different way. I'm not saying all. Everything I'm saying is general. But the intelligence of the pothound is what a lot of them have commented on. Not just the cuteness of it, but the level of intelligence. Remember, these are street dogs and they know how to survive. So that same intelligence they use on the street translates excellently into training and puppy school and agility. They're very hardy dogs.
Yeah. What is the one message you'd like to leave with all pet owners? The one thing that you'd wish they'd remember and internalize and practice?
I would say treat your pets like a member of your family. They're not external to you and your family. They deserve the love, the care, the food, the shelter, the safety, the respect. All of the things that we would want for ourselves, our pets also deserve. They're sentient beings, they have feelings, and they want to belong to you as much as they want you to belong to them. So it's a mutual love story with you and your pets. And do unto your pet as you would like to have done unto you.
Thank you so much, Elspeth, for being my first guest on